أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم إلى نور الفهم وأكرمنا بمعرفة العلم وزين أخلاقنا بالحلم يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا وما أسرفنا وما أنت أعلم به منا. أصلح لنا شأننا كله وأصلح عاقبتنا في الأمور كلها. اللهم دبر لنا فإننا لا نحسن التدبير، وقدر لنا فإننا لا نحسن التقدير. اجعل لنا من كل ضيق مخرجا ومن كل هم فرجا، واجعل لنا من بعد العسر يسرا يا رب العالمين. اللهم عجل بالنصر والفرج القريب لإخواننا المستضعفين في غزة. اللهم انصرهم على القوم الظالمين. اللهم احفظهم من كيد الكائدين ومكر الماكرين وظلم الظالمين. اللهم يا ربنا حقق لهم نصرا وتمكينا، واجعل لهم فتحا مبينا. يا ربنا هيئ لنا قيادة ربانية تقودنا إلى مرضاتك يا رب العالمين. واجعل خير عمرنا آخرة، واجعل خير عملنا خواتمة، واجعل خير يومنا من نلقاك فيه أنت راض عنا. يا Allah, we call upon you, pray to you, beseech you. Ya Allah, we ask you for steadfastness and guidance in the difficult times that we live in. Ya Allah, we ask you to facilitate for us our affairs, to make us steadfast and to guide us to navigate the trying times that we're in. Ya Allah, we ask you to plan for us and to better us and to use us and to change our condition to a better condition individually and as an ummah. Ya Allah, we ask you to be with those oppressed in the land. Ya Allah, we ask you to give relief to those oppressed in the land. Ya Allah, we ask you to give us a leadership that seeks your pleasure. Ya Allah, give us a leadership as an ummah that guides us to your pleasure. Ya Allah, unite our hearts upon your book and on the way of your Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and make the best of our actions the last of our actions, and the best of our days the last of our days, and the best of all days the day we meet you and you're pleased with us. Ya Rabbil Alameen, Ameen, Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana, alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Amma ba'd, jazakumullah khair for attending this week's Friday Forum. We're going to be discussing staying grounded in very uncertain times, and there's a lot to discuss and unpack relating to this subject, and hopefully we can hear from you about your concerns in the present moment, and perhaps look for answers in our deen, some guidance on how to deal with these times that we live in. Before we get into any of that, I'm going to pass it to Akhi Adam. A lot of things happening at the masjid, mashallah, a lot of announcements, so jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Just a few reminders. We are going to have snacks on both sides. Try your best to keep any conversations out of the main musalla. Keep it to the side rooms, inshallah. And then back to the many, many things we have going on here at ICPC. And the first I'm going to start off with is a save the date for the ICPC annual fundraising, which is going to be Saturday, December 6th. So remember that. Mention it to your parents, inshallah. You know, supporting the masjid is hopefully beneficial for all of us. Then this Sunday, we have a youth day for the brothers. So it's a brotherhood fest from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. And within that, there's some special programs for boys age 8 through 11, from 11 to 3. But there's going to be games, basketball, video games, volleyball tournaments, lots of stuff, inshallah. And then something a little closer to home, here in Clifton, we're trying to push for an expansion for the masjid. We're making our voices heard, alhamdulillah, at City Hall. Every month now, the topic of the expansion comes up on the agenda at the City Council meeting, and it's very important for us to show out as a community. And, you know, I was just actually mentioning to Sheikh Osamah, I saw today, in the Clifton newspaper, they actually took out a whole page ad in opposition to the expansion. So just like those opponents of this are showing themselves, we also have to show ourselves. So if you have time, come to the City Council meeting, inshallah. It's going to be this month, October 23rd. That's a Thursday at 6:30 p.m., Clifton City Hall. Next Thursday, inshallah. Then going on at the Prospect Park Masjid, we have Unfiltered, a real dialogue on life and deen with Sheikh Ismail and Munir Hamda. I recommend, especially if you guys know, Dr. Munir and Sheikh Ismail, really great content. Additionally, one day before, and actually it's tomorrow, we have the Fall Fest, the 6th annual Fall Fest at ICPC Patterson, the basketball courts. Vendors, food, henna, raffles, pumpkin patch, guest speakers, lots of stuff to do, inshallah. And that will be Girls Youth. Is that Girls Youth? Or is that just open everybody? I believe it's open to anybody, not just girls youth, but we'll clarify on the chat, inshallah. And then beyond that, we have the ICPC Boys Youth Umrah 2025 trip with our beloved Sheikh Osamah. So if you have any interest as a boy aged 14 plus, inshallah, consider Umrah this year with our beloved Sheikh Osamah. And with that, I pass it back to you, Sheikh.
Jazakallah khair, Akhi Adam. Allah yahfadhkum ya Rabb. So, staying grounded in very uncertain times. Every one of us feels it, but we probably feel it in different ways. The times that we live in are very challenging. They present different challenges. It depends on your stage in life. You know, the challenges for a younger person who's still single is not going to be the same as the challenges for someone who has children, and is not going to be the same as a challenge for someone who is in their later stages of life. But nonetheless, the challenges face individuals and they face society, us as Muslims in the West, and also they face humanity as a whole. And I thought that it would be useful in this hour that we have together to sort of think about our challenges a bit and see if there is anything meaningful, and I'm sure there's plenty of meaningful things, for us to take away in terms of how to find some stability in our lives. With all the uncertainty that's around us, how do I make sure that I don't find myself pulled in every which direction, and find that taking a toll on my emotional well-being, my mental health, my physical health, my relationships, and so on and so forth. Before I get into the subject, I think I want you guys to think with me. And for those of you who are willing to share your reflections and your thoughts, then you could do that directly. And Akhi Adam will repeat what you're saying through the mic, inshallah. For those of you who don't want to do it so directly, you could always put it in the Slido. But the first thing I want to start with addressing with you guys is what concerns you most about the times that we live in. You know, whether it's something personal to you or something that you feel the ummah is dealing with, what would you say and how would you answer this question? Anyone, mashallah, here we go, first. Can you explain further? Technology concerns you? Are you worried of the AI takeover or something? MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. Can you?
Yeah, so the brother in the, a subsection of this larger scope of technology, he's bringing up this idea of how technology, and some of the examples was social media, and how that, influences us in our day-to-day lives, and more specifically how actually the youth that are growing up now, they're just kind of born into it, whereas perhaps my generation or your generation, Sheikh, kind of was at the transition period. So how these youth might go about just being aware of its overall effects and influence.
Jazakallah khair, and also how it's affecting us spiritually. How is the technology affecting us spiritually? I think there's a lot to say at this point. Jazakallah khair, mashallah, may Allah reward you. And I don't know, do we have anyone who teaches in the school systems? Anyone here that's a teacher? We have 1 or 2 or 3, 4, 5 teachers, mashallah. I think anyone who teaches in the school system will be able to see it firsthand, especially if you've been teaching for a while. Kids pre-COVID and kids post-COVID, the kids before social media, before 2006 and 2007 versus kids after. There's a lot to say about this point. A lot of mental health issues and a lot of social skills that have been lost, because of the way that people are starting to live their lives and digest their information and communicate with each other. Jazakallah khair for this point. I can't emphasize, inshallah we'll come back to this point a little bit later, but I can't emphasize how much the human component is a critical part to spiritual growth. There's no way that ChatGPT will ever give you an iman boost. It's just not going to work like that. The ChatGPT may be good for some things, but for iman boosts and spiritual boosts, the human connection between each other is something that's irreplaceable. You can't. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us in a way where we need to be able to deal with human beings. When I isolate, it's the beginning of my ruin. When I isolate, it is the beginning of my ruin in so many different regards. Jazakallah khair. Who else would like to share something and share the biggest concern that you have of the times that we live in? Anyone else want to share something else? If we're getting anything through the Slido, by the way, please let us know about your biggest concerns. Who else? Do we have a second taker? Biggest concern. I want to direct it. So let me ask parents. We have some parents here. Right now at this juncture that we're in, what is your biggest worry as a parent today? Let me position it like that. Do we have any parents that are willing to take this question? Any parents? Your biggest worry? Yes? Can you repeat it?
Yeah, so
Ya Allah.
she mentions, just raising a child in this environment and, all the influences that, being in this country has, and then also seeing the things that are going on overseas and, how you can raise a child, I suppose, in these environments and with everything going on. And I guess keep yourself aligned and make sure the child ends up on the correct path.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. That's a very, very good one. And, as you're talking, I think every parent, this resonates very strongly with every parent. Especially when you hear the stories that are coming from the lives of people. It's very, very scary where, kids find themselves sometimes. They get caught up in the wrong things, kaba'ir, sometimes things that are causing them to leave Islam altogether. Ya Allah, and too many stories that are like this. For me, when I think of this point, I remember Al-Andalus. You guys all know Al-Andalus, I'm sure, right? How long did Islam flourish in Al-Andalus approximately? Huh? What is it? 800? All right. Not 10, 20, 50, right? Not 100, not 200. Hundreds of years. When Muslims left Al-Andalus, what happened to those who remained behind? Scary, very, very, very scary thing. There are now in Al-Andalus, now what is known as Spain, people of Moorish descent who have what appears to be Muslim names, but they have no connection with Islam whatsoever. So it's a very scary thing to be lost, to become lost and disconnected from your origins to that point. Islam flourished in Al-Andalus for many years, but then when Muslims finally were forced to leave Al-Andalus, those who remained behind, after generations, their Islam was forgotten. It's a scary, very scary thing that we as Muslims today need to think very deeply about. Right now, we are in the very first generations of Islam in this country. Some are still first generation Muslim, some are second generation Muslim, and some are third generation Muslim. How many here are third generation Muslim? Meaning that your parents were born here, and your grandparents are the one who came to this country. Any third generation here? Any third generation? All right, just a few, very few. There's more, of course. And then when you go beyond that, fourth generation, it's even less. So it's a very scary thought. What happens when Islam ends up here after 20 generations? Will people lose touch with the language of the Quran? Will masajid still be around? We don't know. What will the condition of, what happens if the political climate takes a turn for the worst? And I think every parent is distressed by the thought of, what if I pass away and I leave my children not equipped with enough knowledge to stay Muslim after I'm long gone? Wallahi, there's examples of this today. where the parents pass away and the children lose their Islam altogether. Nasallah salama wal afiyah. So jazakallah khair for sharing that. What other concerns? What other concerns? You want to share something else? So you're sharing this as your top concern for Muslims in America today, correct? Huh? You want me to translate it? Yeah. Jazakallah khair. So the sister is speaking to the big challenge that we have as Muslims in America and we as an ummah. We live in powerless times, I guess powerless, so to say, where we do not define our own narrative. Unfortunately, it's defined for us. And Muslims are struggling so much to find a seat at the table, whereas our sister is suggesting that we don't have time to think of what's even greater than that, which is creating our own table, meaning owning our own narrative and being able to influence and effect change in our reality, finding strength in our numbers together, as opposed to being in our division and not coming together when it matters most. Jazakallah khair. This is one. I guess this point takes us to ummah. So we had an individual concern, we had a parental concern, and we have an ummah concern. These are different concerns that are on our mind. These things pull at us. It's not easy to live in these. You could only count the points in history where you found the greatest antagonists of those being persecuted to the fullest were from among the Muslims were their own brethren themselves. Wallahi, it's a heart-wrenching reality. Where aid was sitting at the border of Gaza for over a year, and by the way, all the millions and millions of dollars of food that was gathered and put in these trucks waiting at the border of the neighboring country. By the way, food has expiration date. And when I was talking recently with someone who knows someone in one of these aid organizations, a lot of that food that was gathered to relieve the people of Gaza, because it was in trucks waiting for a year to get inside, had to be discarded, right? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us for the powerless times that we live in, where it's very, very difficult to muster power as a community. Now, of course, we're not going to succumb to this. There's a lot of hope. We need to ground ourselves in something. We're going to get to that point in the second part of this discussion. Jazakallah khair for sharing this concern. Is there anyone else? There's one point here.
We have a few from the Slido, the first of which being the rise of femininity among men and its counterpart, the rise of masculinity amongst women.
It just says it just like that? This person wants us to get in trouble. All right, so the rise of femininity among men and masculinity among women. Well, look, I'll put it to this. This is how I'll zoom out a bit. We learn from the Prophet ﷺ that one of the features of end of times is things will be confused. Things will be lopsided. There will be a general sense of misdirection. And wallahi, misdirection kills people. It causes a lot of depression, anxiety. When people don't know what to do, those feelings of helplessness, put them in a very dangerous place. I'm serious. This confusion, this misdirection leads to poor choices. And these poor choices have catastrophic effects. Who the person ends up deciding to get married to, what the person does with their career, who the person's choice of friends are, all of this general sense of misdirection. What's cool and what's not. What's success and what's failure. The confusion of these definitions, leads to a lot, and that's where I would fit this under. The confusion of roles and the confusion of concepts and ideas in society. And I think that part of this misinformation is coming from not properly investing in building ourselves within. A lot of these subjects are deeply rooted spiritually. Before their concepts and academic discussions and stuff like that, I think a lot of it is a spiritual problem. People fleeing from a sense of responsibility, people fleeing from a sense of commitment, and that manifesting in other things. But Jazakallah khair for sharing it, the person who shared it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Again, biggest concerns. Anyone else want to share something before we transition to the next part of this discussion? Anyone else? Your biggest number one concern. I want to only focus on the top concerns, right? Anyone? Any takers? No one mentioned anything about, what is it? There's more chat ones? Okay, let's see what we got.
So the justification of sins and the way this person frames it is even amongst those who perhaps grew up within the masjid environment.
Justification of sin. I would zoom out for that one too. General sense of misconception about my relationship with Allah and my relationship with people. Yeah, there is justification of sin, and that's a very scary thing. It comes from a deteriorated spiritual state. Why would I justify sin? I would only do that if my heart is not where it's supposed to be. If my heart is fueled by desire. And that's the other thing, no one mentioned this yet. The desire is running wild in every part of life. People focusing, you guys know that the same country where the genocide against our brothers and sisters in Gaza happened, also happens to have one of the biggest malls in the world. Do you guys ever know that? One of the biggest malls in the world that's been built is in Palestine. Just not in Gaza, the other side of Palestine. A massive mall that challenges the size of the malls in the Khalij and the Gulf. We live in a world of contradictions. This same world of contradictions has led the ones who are leading the peace talks to also have the biggest military base for America and all of the Middle East. These are one of the contradictions that we live in, right? One of the contradictions that we live in, again, this is things that are known, not publicly, but they're known by people who deal in the field of relief. The same country that hosted the peace talk summits is the same country that is selling the aid to those relief organizations that are going in Gaza. In fact, they're requiring it to buy them, but you got to buy it from us, right? You guys know which country I'm talking about, right? You got to buy the aid from us. Who's that? Who hosted the peace talks? Egypt. You want aid to go into Gaza? You got to buy it from us. And we're not going to sell it to you at price, or we're not going to give you a discount. We're going to sell it 3 times the amount, 4 times the amount. Why? It's a crazy world that we live in. People dying left and right, and other people profiting off of their genocide. It's a crazy world of contradictions. Ajaib ad-dunya. Again, all you need to do is just do a little bit of research and reflection, and you say, how on earth can the world operate with such levels of hypocrisy? It's a scary thing. And all this comes from a lost sense of humanity. Lost sense of humanity. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protect our sense of fitrah. May Allah subhanahu, because when the fitrah is lost, human beings will no longer operate like human beings. When fitrah is lost, human beings will no longer operate as human beings. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ مِمَّا أَدْرَكَ النَّاسُ مِنْ كَلَامِ النُّبُوَّةِ الْأُولَى إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحِي فَاصْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ. From the earliest teachings of prophethood, if you're someone who has no shame, do as you may. Nothing's going to stop you. Nothing will stop you. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. All right. Before we transition, anyone else want to share something about your top concern? No one shared anything about drugs. You guys aren't concerned about drugs? No one's here concerned about drugs? By the way, if you don't know much about drugs, in our own community, many of our youth are overdosing, losing their lives because of drugs. You know, in fact, maybe they are not losing their lives or overdosing, they're wasting their lives away. Again, a world of contradictions. A world of wasting their lives away because of being pulled into things that end up having this control over them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help anyone who's dealing with drugs get out of it. Ya Rab. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and protect our families from toxic friendships. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from toxic surroundings that ruin our lives. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma ameen. What else? Is there anyone else want to share something before we move on? Last person. Anyone else? Go ahead, share it. All right. You want to share a few more? A little bit more detail? What do you mean? Can you hear? Or should I translate?
No, absolutely. The rise of fascism within the United States and some of the examples given were, for example, especially on the, perhaps on the right wing of this country, how certain policies seem or are actually targeted almost towards minority communities such as us, whether that be through immigration or other means.
Yeah. You guys are following what ICE is doing, right? That's the biggest form of fascism that I see dominating, and may Allah help us get to the end of this. Hopefully it finishes when the current president's tenure finishes, Ya Rab. But ICE, it's a scary thing. It's a crazy world that we live in. The thought of people just being picked up off the street and shipped to some facility and no one being able to find out any information, no due process, nothing. It's a scary thing. We never thought we'd live to see that happen in our country, in America, right? And, and the scary thought is if this starts affecting our religious institutions, right? Now we're saying all we want, anything we want about Zionism and about the terrorist state of Israel. Maybe one day, if we share those types of words, there would be big consequences, stripping people of their freedom of speech, maybe perhaps limiting the freedom of speech that are in our masajid. These are things that we're all scared of. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protect us from having to deal with that type of reality where we lose our freedoms and liberties that we worked for the past decades to build up through our Islamic institutions and our masajid and our schools. May Allah protect us from having to deal with that. Allahumma ameen. Jazakallah khair for sharing that one. So, staying grounded in uncertain times. There's a lot of uncertainty. We shared a lot of this right now. The second part of this discussion is, where's the salvation? How do I stay grounded? What's the role of my heart? What's the role of our relationship with each other as brotherhood or sisterhood? What's the role of community in all this? How can I sort of deal with this reality without being taken down by the most negative things in it? There's a hadith that I want to start sharing with you guys in this regard. The Prophet ﷺ tells us to function in the world as follows. Kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharibun aw abiru sabil. Prophet ﷺ says, profound words of wisdom, be in this dunya as though you are a stranger or you are a passerby. In the khutbah earlier today, I was speaking a lot about this. I spoke a lot about this. The topic of today's khutbah, anyone here heard the khutbah? Anyone here heard the khutbah? Right? Two people. You remember what it's about, Ustaz Lutfi? Being careful from Jazakallah khair, you actually remember it, mashallah. I thought no one listens. Alhamdulillah, I feel a lot better now. Toxic worldly attachment, right? Scary thing. How do I break out of being so attached to what I have and what I want and who I know and where I go, right? How do I get out of that? And I shared a scene. There's this brother, it was shared with me. He was a long-time volunteer with Al Maghrib. His name was Freddie. He did a lot of good things. His janazah was today. He was only 46 years old. He had cancer. His cancer led to kidney failure, and he passed away. And in the past few days, someone close to him shared a video of him in a very frail, weak state, and he looked into the camera, and he said, I'm dying. I'm dying. And the image of the video showed how, the realization of someone who my time in this dunya has come to an end. Sometimes those type of shocking things like wake the person up. Like, what am I wasting my time with? What matters? What really doesn't matter? Am I getting lost in the details of life and the distractions of life, right? We shared this, I think, in a recent Friday forum past few weeks, where the Prophet ﷺ drew a drawing, and he mentioned that this is the human being, a line extending beyond the box. And the Prophet ﷺ described the line extending beyond the box as the person's hopes and dreams. And this journey in life, and then there's distractions from this line. And the Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِذَا جَاءَ الْأَجَلِ انْقَطَعَ الْأَمَلِ. When the appointed hour comes, all hopes and dreams fade away. They're gone. That's it. So how do I break out of toxic worldly attachment that causes a sense of instability? Again, because that which grounds us is not something on the outside. That which grounds us is something that's in here. This needs to be okay and well. If my heart is enamored with everything around me, those things don't last. The relationship doesn't last. The house doesn't last. The car doesn't last. The phone doesn't last. Nothing of it, none of this stuff lasts. The Prophet ﷺ was told, O Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, عِشْ مَا شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ. Live as long as you may, you will die. أَحْبِبْ مَنْ شِئْتَ فَإِنَّكَ مُفَارِقُ. Love whomever you may, you will separate from them. And do whatever you may, you're going to be called to account for it, right? So what grounds me in these very uncertain times? There's no greater anchor. This is one of them. It's not the only thing, but there's no greater anchor. This is what we need to start with. No greater anchor than the soul. Wallahi, that the soul and figuring out the spiritual path is the path out of so many of these conflicts that we're talking about. The spiritual path will help me figure out my concerns and my anxieties for my children, right? وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. Right? Their father was a righteous man, their mother was a righteous woman. Embracing the spiritual path will help me figure out conflicts and difficulties if they're in my home, in dealing with my children, or in dealing with my spouse, or in dealing with my friends. Embracing the spiritual path, brothers and sisters, is something that cannot be exaggerated. Wallahi, even we're talking about the human connection and the fear of social media and all the isolation, all of it, what it's doing to our mental health and our emotional states. The spiritual path, I need it. Wallahi, I need in this time more than ever a strong sense of spirituality and a deep connection, deeply rooted connection with Allah Azza wa Jal, with His book. That's the salvation. Asim min al-fitan. Seriously, brothers and sisters. This is one point that I think is a critical part of this stability. If I am, and you know what, by the way, we see this when we look at the life of our Prophet ﷺ and the life of previous prophets. They actually, Surah Yusuf, you guys know Surah Yusuf, right? One of the most beautiful surahs of the Quran. It was revealed where? Where was it revealed? Where was it revealed? Mecca or Medina? Is it Mecca or Madani? How do you know it's Mecca? You know automatically for a few reasons, right? Right? One of them is because it's of the stories of the past. All the stories of the past are mentioned in Mecca surahs for the most part, except Surah Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran. They are an exception. And all of the surahs that start with disjointed letters are Mecca except Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran. Everything else is Mecca. Surah Yusuf came to the Prophet ﷺ while he was in Mecca. Why does that matter? At that time, the Prophet ﷺ was dealing with a whole lot of oppression and marginalization. And through Surah Yusuf, Allah was telling His Prophet ﷺ, just as Yusuf went through a lot of ups and downs in life, he was envied by his brothers and thrown at the bottom of the well and sold into slavery, and he was pressured by Imra'at al-Aziz and wrongfully imprisoned and so on and so forth. All the things that happened to Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, there is a sense of stability that you find in his story that's so remarkable and amazing. The words of the story in the beginning of the surah, "Inna naraka min al-muhsinin," right? And this phrase of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam being of al-muhsinin, the excellent ones, is mentioned on the tongue of his brothers, on the tongue of the prisoners, right? Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, with the ups and downs, stayed consistent. How do I stay consistent? That can only happen if the soul is anchored properly, if the soul is stable, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يُثَبِّتُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِالْقَوْلِ الثَّابِتِ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ. Thabat and steadfastness is a gift. No one earns it, right? Allah gives it. Steadfastness is a gift from Allah. And it's a gift to those who are sincere, servants of His, and those who work on their souls the way they need to work on them. So this is number one. Brothers and sisters, this is the first one I will give you. There's a lot more to say now about what anchors me in these times that we live in. I also want to hear from you guys on this one. And I want to hear like practical steps that we could possibly take towards that. I'll mention another one. This is second one before I turn to you guys and ask you guys for more. This is essential. Brothers and sisters, there's no greater time where we need to band together as Jama'at al-Muslimin. Right? I need to be with the believers. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, فَإِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُ الذِّئْبُ الْقَاصِيَةِ. I've said this. I go to some Islamic schools and I teach at these schools, and I told them these words. I think, oh, there you go. I see one of my students here. And I tell them the doorway to emotional ruin is what? What is it? What is it? You just answered it on the quiz. What is it? The doorway to emotional ruin is? I need to check your quiz grade. The doorway to emotional ruin is isolation. Brothers, فَإِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُ الذِّئْبُ الْقَاصِيَةِ. Don't do it to yourself. One of the worst decisions a Muslim could make today, young or old, is to decide to cut off from the masjid. You know what? I'm going to just do my own thing. I'll go to the gym and here and there and hang out with friends in front of Dunkin' Donuts, or go to the mall, or مش عارف إيه, but I will become utterly spiritually depleted. No connection with them. I can't do it. I cannot do it. Wallahi, I cannot imagine being able to deal with the difficulties of our times all alone. No, we need mirrors. We need people who are going to remind us when we forget, strengthen us when we're reminded. We need this. We're human beings, you know. I need a support system around me. No matter how weak or strong you think you are, we cannot hack life all by ourselves. This is step number one. Please. And I think all parents, parents need this too. Everyone needs this, right? But I think all parents, their number one mission in life, and may Allah reward the parents for all the sacrifices they make for their children, is to try to get them to know who? To get them to know who? Good friends. Every mother and father is going here, that, and the other, and spending so much time. Oh my God, how can I convince my son or my daughter to have good friends? Brothers and sisters, this is, you think that this is, well, whatever, this has been said 1,000,001 times. This is it. It's been said 1,000,001 times because this is it. There are too many stories at the beginning to drug abuse, the beginning to a haram relationship, or the beginning to something else that's so destructive, all began from having the wrong person in your ear. Wrong person in your ear. Sometimes the reason for the children rebelling against their own parents is the wrong person in the ear. Wrong person in the ear. A friend goes and tells your son, your daughter, oh, don't let them talk to you like that. Oh, don't listen. Oh, leave the house. Okay, this happens. It's a real thing. And sometimes this wrong person in the ear actually leads to the ruin of a marriage too. Wrong person in the ear. Right? That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the hadith, مَلْعُونٌ مَنْ خَبَّبَ امْرَأَةً عَلَى زَوْجِهَا. You know, this happens, but this is a scary thing where you find a marriage that's going well in itself, and then the wrong people get involved. And they put thoughts in the guy's head or in the girl's head, the husband and the wife, and they make them fight with each other. And they lead to the end of that marriage, all because of having the wrong person in your inner circle. Right? There's a lot to say about this, brothers and sisters. I cannot isolate in these times. It is too difficult to deal. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he says in the hadith, alaykum bil jama'ah. Be keen on the jama'ah. That's why there's another hadith that says, ma min thalathatin fi qaryatin wala badu. There's no three individuals who are in a rural area or in a town that do not establish the jama'ah with each other, إِلَّا اسْتَحْوَذَ عَلَيْهِمُ الشَّيْطَانِ. Right? When I allow no jama'ah in my home, what's going to happen? Who's going to take charge of my home? Right? The shaitan's going to take charge of the home. When there's no, لَا تَجْعَلُوا بُيُوتَكُمْ مَقَابِرَ. Don't make your homes like graveyards. Establish jama'ah in the home. Why? Because it is طَارِدَ لِلشَّيْطَانِ. When the believers are together, the shaitan is weak. There's a lot to say to this. Now I want to hear a little bit from you guys. What do you think lends to stability? Inshallah, we should be done very soon, bidnillah. Within the next 10 minutes or so, or 15, we'll finish for the night, inshallah. So what do you think lends to stability in the difficult times that we live in? I mentioned two things: embracing the spiritual path and surrounding yourself with good people. What else? Practically, who wants to share something? Who else? Anyone? Think with me. What can protect you? You want to share something? You want to say it?
Yeah, accountability. You know, not I suppose not blaming others, and having a sense of self-reflection and thinking about the way our actions ultimately impact that around us.
Absolutely. I think it's easy to become an armchair critic and look at the world and say everything that's wrong about the world. And we learned this from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Don't be that person who just looks at the world and say, "Man qala inna an-nasa qad halaku fahuwa ahlakuhum." He's the most ruined among them. The one who says, "Oh, the people are ruined. Oh, the ummah's bad. Oh, things will never get better. This and that." Right? But I need to hold myself accountable. What am I doing? What am I doing? What are my expectations? Do I have it? By the way, this is another big pitfall of today: having expectations. It ruins relationships. It ruins friendships. It ruins a whole lot. Having a sense of expectations. Expectations with Allah. I have expectations of Allah. I think I deserve this. We call this something else. We call it entitlement. I take my blessings for granted. It's as though Allah Azza wa Jal needs to give me this. Allah owes me this. I'm supposed to have, and I take the blessings for granted. And that's Allah salam al afiyah. Because if I take my blessings for granted, they can be easily stripped away from me. Right? So expectations. Holding myself accountable. If I'm talking about relationships or about situations that happen. Having that sincerity for willing to look at myself in the mirror and say, what do I need to fix about myself? What's wrong about me? This is a lost quality. The Prophet ﷺ said, by the way, this will happen in the end of times. إِذَا رَأَيْتُمْ هَوًا مُتَّبَعًا إِذَا رَأَيْتُمْ شُحًّا مُطَاعًا وَهَوًا مُتَّبَعًا. If you see a sense of stinginess, where everyone is thinking of themselves, and everyone is following their hawa and their whims, and on top of وَالدُّنْيَا مُؤْثَرَةً, and people are preferring their dunya and their personal private indulgences over everything else. Right? وَإِعْجَابَ كُلِّ ذِي رَأْيٍ بِرَأْيِهِ. And everyone's impressed with their own opinion. Then the Prophet ﷺ's advice, if that ever happens, in a time period, then focus on bettering yourself. عَلَيْكَ بِخُوَيِّصَةِ نَفْسِكَ وَدَعَنْكَ أَمْرَ الْعَامَّةِ. The Prophet ﷺ's advice. Be very careful of how you navigate that terrain, because it's very difficult. It's a very difficult time to live in. When selfishness pervades. Selfishness leads to mistrust. Because people start thinking, everyone is thinking for their own interest. And this happens. By the way, selfishness in families, selfishness in communities. When people see that everyone's operating with selfishness, it'll cause a scarcity of goodness. Oh, everyone's thinking about themselves. Why should I do something? Right? I'm going to think about me too. Right? So what else? What else grounds us in these very difficult times that we live in? Who wants to share something else? Do we have anything else that's coming over there, or are they just all questions? Anyone want to share something that you think is very useful for you in these difficult times? Yes. What is it? A healthy?
Yeah, so essentially scheduling out your day, creating a healthy schedule, and actually I like that a lot, Sheikh, because when I've implemented that in the past, it's been the most transformative in my life. Just being able to see, the tangible steps that you're going to take throughout the day.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's a very good point. If nonsense dominates my time, or things that are of little otherworldly value, let me put it at that. If things dominate my schedule that are all of very little otherworldly value, then how am I going to be grounded? How am I going to find strength in these times that we live? There's no way. It's a numbers game, right? I want a sense of spirituality, and I spend 1 hour in my week for Allah, and then the other 100-something odds for my nafs. How's that going to work? It's a numbers game. If it's truly a priority, it needs to reach a point of critical mass. It needs to become dominant enough in my schedule where it starts leaving an impact. That's like someone who wants to memorize the Quran and comes, we have a Quran school, right? The Quran school here. You want to memorize the Quran, and you come once a week to memorize the Quran. Are you ever going to finish memorizing the Quran coming once a week? That'll never happen. Keep dreaming. You'll memorize 1 week, and the next week you'll forget. It will not happen. It needs consistency. It needs to reach critical mass, right? I want a sense of spirituality, but I want to give very little time of that in my schedule. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. So how do I find myself grounded in difficult times? I need to keep myself busy. This is like finding success in my life 101. How to find success in your life 101. If you don't busy yourself with good things, it'll busy you with awful things. It's a basic dynamic of life. Jazakallah khair for sharing that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Anyone else want to share something else? What can keep us grounded in the very uncertain times that we live in? Yes. Jazakallah khair. Can you repeat it?
I believe the core of that is perspective, and the example that the brother gave using Quranic examples is the story of Sayyidina Yusuf, same that you mentioned earlier, all right, and being able to look at our lives and look at those comparisons within the Quran and the struggles that not just perhaps within the Quran, but also you can also look at the seerah, right, and our beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the trials and tribulations that he went through, and putting into perspective his difficulties versus ours, and so forth. Not to necessarily belittle the difficulties that anybody is going through.
Yeah, absolutely. Jazakallah khair. I think what your point brings us to is if I'm going to be grounded, I said we need to build the soul, right? And I said we need to build our relationships with really good people too, right? I also need to build my knowledge base and my understanding. This mind is supposed to be the advisor of my heart. If this is filled with nonsense, the advice it's going to give the heart is going to be very bad, right? I need to nurture this mind. How do I remain grounded in uncertain times? Well, I need to develop very solid understandings. I need the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ with me. I need the lives of our righteous predecessors with me. I need the basic knowledge base that makes my worship meaningful, right? That gives more power to my actions, more guidance to my decisions. This is a very, very critical part. Jazakallah khair. So if I want to be grounded, I need to nurture my mind, and I need to nurture my soul, and I need to nurture my relationships. These, I think, three summarize it. And I need to also do the actions and behaviors. This is the last thing I'll share with you guys before we take some questions at the end for the night. We'll take one or two questions after that, maybe perhaps the most upvoted ones. But they say, al-haraka barakah, right? You guys heard that before? Haraka barakah, right? What does that mean? I need to move. I need to do something, right? I can't just say sitting on my hands and hoping. Sayyidina Umar, he walked in the masjid at a time, it wasn't salah time, right? He said to someone sitting in the masjid, لا يقعد أحدكم عن طلب الرزق ثم يقول رب ارزقني فقد علمتم أن السماء لا تمطر ذهبا ولا فضة. None of you should just sit down in the masjid, and say, oh Allah, give me money, give me money. You know that, and we wish it did, but it doesn't happen like that. You know that the sky does not rain down gold or silver. It doesn't happen like that. Haraka, but I need to do things that are constructive with my time. If I fill my time with the constructive, there will be no time for the destructive. Let me do something that brings me barakah in my life. If you have your parents, do birr to your parents. Do it. Wallahi, it'll save you from the worst of this dunya and the worst of the next. Do birr to your parents. All right, you know what? If we have any people that are younger in the audience, sons, daughters, not married yet, and you're so stressed out, when am I going to get married and why isn't it working? Have you ever tried to do birr al-walidain with the intention of Allah blessing you with your marriage? Have you ever tried this? Try it. This is something that opens doorways. What does birr al-walidain have to do with getting married? Wallahi, it does have something to do with it. This is something in the realm of the unseen. I need to start doing things, right? Idfa'ul bala'a bis-sadaqa. If you find yourself in hardship, then maybe what you need to do is give a little bit of charity through your time or through your money. You know what? Maybe I need to go to the hospital and see some people who are on the verge of death. Maybe I need to help those who are the elderly. If again, you're young, you have time, you don't have responsibilities. Why don't you do this with your time? Go volunteer at a senior citizens home. Why not? Go help at a shelter. Why not? Go figure out how you can, you should race to clean the masjid, right? It's an honorable thing. It's an opportunity. Well, I'm just going to go at a time, Dhuhr, Asr, no one's there. I'm going to go inside the bathrooms and I'm going to clean them. Right? I'm going to clean the floor I'm going to do these things with the intention of finding barakah in my life. This is how our righteous predecessors would attack the problems of their life. One of them said it, right? I find myself overwhelmed and concerned, and then I hasten to sujood and I don't come out until I find that Allah relieved me of what I'm in. That's the type of spirituality that we need. This is what we need to deal with our biggest challenges today. May Allah help us with that. Do we have any a question or two? Before we're done with the night?
Sheikh, actually, there's another suggestion, if you don't mind me sharing.
Sure.
It, which is wanting good for each other and helping your Muslim brothers and sisters succeed, because it's ultimately success for the ummah. And that kind of reminds me actually of, of the feeling of being in service to others. Sarahatan, what a feeling it is.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair. That's a very, very beautiful one. Wallahi, being a person of goodwill that wants to do good things for people, this person, don't be afraid for this person. This person might go through one difficulty or another, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put them through some difficult tests in their life, but the person who has an overwhelming goodwill for people, Allah will take care of this person. Allah will take care of them. Don't worry about it. Just do what's right and leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, is there a question to take?
Yeah. So, how can you advise older family members to focus on spirituality and stop gossip or useless talk and problems? Death is all around, yet people may be heedless. And I picked this question. It is highly upvoted, but specifically because there are many youth here, and sometimes that's perhaps an area where many youth don't necessarily know how to navigate situations like that.
Look, the best thing that can you really change what people decide to invest themselves in? You can't. لست عليهم بمسيطر. The best thing you could hope to be is a magnet. What does that mean? I want to be a magnet, right? You want to be a magnet, Habibi in the back over there? Be a magnet. It's good, right? Being a magnet's good. If I'm strong spiritually enough myself, and I'm living by this, and people around me can see how this is changing my life, then you never know, maybe if they're even older, they would want to do the same thing. You don't be surprised. Sometimes if the people see the joy that going to the masjid for salah brings to you, reading Quran brings to you, serving others brings to you, and maybe perhaps if you offer them that opportunity, you never, sooner or later they say, you know what, I want this for myself. I want this for myself. You know, again, like, people are going to have to make the choice individually, alone, by themselves, but the only thing I could really hope to do is be strong enough a magnet that anyone who comes too close to me can want to do what I'm aspiring to do in terms of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That would be my advice. You know, these gatherings that are not for Allah, they'll be a source of regret. They often lead to a lot of conflict and a lot of disputes, and that's why they're hasarat yawm al-qiyamah. What are the hasarat of the Day of Judgment, the sources of regret? Those majalis in which Allah wasn't remembered. They will be hasarat. May Allah protect us from that. One last question.
Sheikh, do you have any advice for someone grieving the loss of a loved one?
Do I have any advice for someone grieving the loss of a loved one? Look, again, you don't want your sadness and your grief to translate to negative energy. So how do I not allow it to translate to negative energy? You know what? Maybe I could take that grief and put it to good use. You know what? I'm going to build a well for the mother or the father I lost. You know what? I'm going to send money to this country or that country. You know what? I am going to, even when I read Quran, every time I read Quran, I'm going to make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the portion of reward of this recitation of Quran to my parents who passed away. You know, if you're grieving the loss of a loved one, figure out ways to remember them that'll bring them nur in their graves. You know what? We're not utterly disconnected from those who are in the graves. You know, as the Prophet ﷺ, when he called out to the people in Uhud, the kuffar of Quraysh who disbelieved, he called out to them, فَهَلْ وَجَدْتُمْ مَا وَعَدَ رَبُّكُمْ حَقًّا? Have you found the promise of your Lord to be true? So they said to the Prophet, they can't hear you, they're dead. The Prophet ﷺ said, مَا أَنْتُمْ بِأَسْمَعَ لِي مِنْهُمْ. You're not more capable of hearing me than they are. They could hear me crystal clear. So we're not cut off from those who passed away. If someone you love passed away, the best way to grieve over them, use that sadness for something that's going to actually help them in the moment right now when they're in their grave. Go to their grave. Make dua for them. Read Quran by their grave. You know, if they had someone that they used to take care of that's still alive, go visit that person. Go do acts of goodness in their name. Be a continuation of hasanat for them. This is the best way to deal with that grief. Amma just sitting down and dealing with the negative emotions and crying over it, this is not going to lead to constructive things. Crying is good in itself, but I need to use those tears for something good. And what better good thing than for something that's going to help the one that I miss so much right now, right? So that's how I would advise that person to think about it. Wallahu alam. Inshallah, we'll stop here for today. جزاكم الله خير سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Inshallah, we'll see you guys next week for another session of the Friday Forum. I'll have Ustadh Mundhir with me and we'll do another topic inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.